The pain was a shard of ice, sharp and familiar, lancing through my abdomen. My eyes flew open, not to the sterile white of a hospital ceiling, but to the familiar cracked plaster of a low roof, stained with the persistent map-like blooms of last year's mold. The air was thick with the scent of coarse homespun and the faint, astringent smell of soap pods drying by the window. This wasn't a medical ward. This was Clara's house. My fiancé Leo's younger sister. My hand, moving of its own volition, pressed against my stomach. It was flat. Smooth. No ridged, angry scar. The one that had been my cruel souvenir from 3 lost babies and a surgeon's desperate knife in another lifetime. A tremor, more seismic than any physical pain, rocked me from the inside out. I sat up so fast the rough spun sheets rasped against my skin. On the old wooden chest beside the bed lay a single garment. A faded crimson jacket, its cotton worn to a pale pink in places, the color of a dying rose. Neatly folded beneath it was a sheet of paper. I reached for it, my fingers cold. At the top, in clumsy, earnest handwriting, were 2 words: marriage promise. And at the bottom 2 names: Maya Vance and Leo Thorne. The room tilted. A dam burst inside my skull, and a torrent of memories, not dreams, not imaginings, but the visceral, aching truth of a life already lived, crashed over me. Tomorrow I was to put on that pathetic red jacket and become Maya Thorne. For 10 years I would wither in this village. I would pour my parents' life savings into Leo's bottomless pockets, listen to his honeyed promises of future empires, and work my hands raw to support his vision. I would watch the light in my mother's eyes dim with worry as I sent home letter after letter asking for just a little more to keep his failing ventures afloat. And his reward for my devotion? When a sliver of success finally came, he would flee to the city with a warehouse owner's daughter, his pockets lined with what was left of my family's money. I, pregnant and frantic, would chase after him in a snowstorm. He would shove me away. I would fall. The blood on the snow would be brighter than that faded jacket, and the child within me would be gone, along with my health, my spirit, and finally my life before I ever saw 40. A knock, sharp and imperious, rattled the thin door. Maya? You awake in there? Sun's high. Plenty to do before tomorrow. The voice of Agnes Thorne, Leo's mother. It dripped with the same smug certainty I remembered, the tone of a woman who believes she's clinched an advantageous deal. In my first life that voice had cowed me. Now it ignited a cold, clean fury. I looked down at the paper in my hand. This flimsy sheet was meant to be the contract for my suffering. My fingers tightened, the edges biting into my skin. Oh, not again. I snatched the small sewing scissors from the chest. The sound was crisp, final in the quiet room. Snip, snip, snip. I cut the marriage promise into a shower of confetti, watching the pieces drift down to the packed earth floor like the ashes of my old, foolish heart. The door flew open with a bang. Agnes Thorne stood framed in the doorway, her eyes immediately finding the scattered paper snow. Her face, sharp as a hatchet, darkened with rage. What in God's name have you done? You agreed to this. You think you can just back out? You think the Thorns are a joke? I stood up, meeting her glare without flinching. The fear was gone, burned away by the certainty of what lay down the path she offered. The agreement is void, Agnes. I'm not marrying Leo. I'm going home to Riverside. Today. You ungrateful little, she spat and lunged, her hand aimed for my arm. I sidestepped, stumbling back right into the solid chest of the man who had just entered. Leo. He caught my shoulders, his face a mask of gentle concern. Maya darling, what's all this? Is this about the house? I know it's not much yet, but I swear to you once my business takes off. I shrugged off his touch as if it were poison ivy. Save your breath, Leo. I've already heard a lifetime of your promises. They're empty. His mask slipped, revealing a flicker of bewildered irritation. Don't be like that. I'm going to make something of myself. We'll have everything. You dream of being rich, I said, my voice as cold as the memory of that snow. I dream of being free. We are not the same. This is over. I turned and grabbed the small canvas bag I'd arrived with a week ago. It held little, they'd made sure of that. You're not going anywhere. Leo's voice lost its softness, turning hard. His hand shot out and clamped around my wrist, his grip like an iron shackle. You think you can humiliate me like this? Humiliate my family? How will we face anyone? Agnes, seizing the moment, barreled past us into the small yard, her voice rising to a shriek designed to carry. Neighbors! Everyone come see. See the city girl's true colors. She led my poor boy on, let him spend what little we have, and now she wants to run off. A heartless, scheming little tramp. Her performance was effective. Like moths to a flame, figures began to appear at fences and in doorways. Within minutes, the dusty yard was crowded with the villagers of Oak Hollow, their faces a tapestry of curiosity, judgment, and thinly veiled delight at the drama. The pressure of their stares was a physical weight. In my past life, this public shaming had broken me. I had crumpled under the weight of their disapproval, allowing Leo to gently rescue me from the crowd's disdain, pulling me back into his trap with whispered apologies and renewed vows. Now I saw it for the manipulation it was. A grand, theatrical guilt trip. I wrenched my wrist from Leo's grasp and reached into my bag. I pulled out 2 pieces of paper carefully preserved and held them high. Since you want an audience, Agnes, let's give them the full story. I called out, my voice clear and steady over the murmurs. This first paper is an IOU. For $70. Signed by Leo Thorne last autumn. He said he needed it to buy timber to start a carpentry business. I paused, letting my gaze sweep the crowd. He used it to buy a new rifle for his brother. A ripple went through the onlookers. I brandished the second paper. And this is a banknote showing a withdrawal of $300 by my father, Silas Vance. Leo told him it was for materials to build a proper house for his new bride. I gestured around me at the dilapidated, moss-grown cottage. Does this look like $300 worth of materials to you? Leo's face went pale. Agnes screeched, that was your bride price. A gift. A gift. I laughed, and the sound was so bitter it silenced her. Your family hasn't spent a single coin on me or this wedding. My family has funded everything, while your son talks of millions but can't even afford a train ticket without begging my father. Is that what you call potential? The whispers in the crowd grew louder, shifting in tone. Always thought that boy was all talk. $300. Old man Vance is too kind for his own good. Leo surged forward, face twisted in panic. Give me those. That was private. I stepped back, tucking the papers safely away. It's not private when it's my family's livelihood you're squandering. Chase your fortune, Leo. But you'll do it without me and you will pay back what you owe. I turned to the sea of faces, my heart pounding not with fear, but with a fierce, liberating conviction. People of Oak Hollow. I, Maya Vance, declare my engagement to Leo Thorne null and void. The debts he owes are his own. The debts his family took on for a wedding that will not happen are theirs. I am leaving. Now. I didn't wait for a response. I hoisted my bag and walked straight through the parting crowd. I heard Agnes's outraged sputters, Leo's furious call, but then another voice, older and stern, cut through. Let her go, Agnes. You've been caught in a lie. A forced vine bears no fruit. I didn't look back. My feet carried me down the dirt path, past the staring eyes, toward the main road. A rusty tractor, its bed filled with sacks of grain, was idling there, about to make the journey to Riverside. The driver, an old man with a kind face, saw my expression and gave a slight nod. I climbed up beside him. As the engine coughed and roared to life, and the tractor began its bumpy journey away from Oak Hollow, I turned my face into the wind. It was dry and smelled of dust and distant rain, but to me it was the sweetest air I'd ever breathed. The trees, heavy with late summer green, blurred into a streak as we picked up speed. I closed my eyes and made a silent vow to the ghost of the woman I used to be. Leo Thorne, I thought. The ledger of that other life is closed. I owe you nothing. From this moment on, every breath, every step, every heartbeat belongs to me. The tractor ride was a bone-rattling baptism. For over 3 hours, I clung to the rough wooden slats of the wagon as it jolted over ruts and stones, each lurch carrying me farther from the nightmare I'd escaped and closer to a dream I'd thought lost forever. The sun beat down, baking the dust that coated my skin and clothes. I didn't care. With every mile, the tight knot of dread that had lived in my chest for a decade in my other life loosened another degree. Then the landscape began to change. The endless fields gave way to scattered, then clustered gray brick homes. Telephone lines sketched black against the sky. We rumbled onto a paved road, the sudden smoothness feeling surreal. And there they were, the familiar weathered buildings of Riverside, some adorned with the fading red lanterns from the last festival. Men in worn suit jackets pedaled black flying pigeon bicycles with serious expressions. The smell in the air shifted, less of earth and hay, more of coal smoke, frying oil, and the dense living scent of 1,000 people in close quarters. Tears, hot and sudden, blurred the scene. This was home. The place I had ached for in the quiet, desperate moments of my first life. The place I'd never seen again after my wedding day. The tractor driver grunted, indicating a corner. "This is as far as I go into the center, miss." "Thank you," I said, my voice hoarse. "Thank you more than you know." I jumped down, my legs wobbly from the long ride. The familiar streets unfolded before me like a beloved map. I walked, my bag feeling lighter with each step, past the corner store where Old Man Fong still sold pickled vegetables, past the communal water tap where women gathered to gossip. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, hopeful drumbeat. Finally, I stood before a green-painted wooden gate, the paint peeling in familiar patterns. The courtyard within was small, tidy, with a potted lemon tree and lines of laundry. And there, kneeling by a small vegetable patch, her hands deep in the soil, was my mother. Eleanor Vance looked up, a frown of concentration on her face that melted into pure, unguarded shock. The handful of wilted greens she was holding fell from her fingers. "Why, Her voice was a whisper, then a disbelieving cry. "Why, the wedding is tomorrow." I couldn't speak. I dropped my bag, crossed the courtyard in 3 strides and fell into her arms. The smell of her, of lavender soap and the faint, comforting scent of the kitchen, unlocked a dam of emotion I hadn't known I was holding. I buried my face in her shoulder, my body shaking with silent sobs. "Oh, my girl," she murmured, her own tears wet against my temple. "What happened? Did something happen?" My father, Silas, emerged from the house, a newspaper in his hand. He stopped short on the step, his eyes widening behind his spectacles. He was a quiet man, a bookkeeper by trade, with a calm demeanor that hid a deep, steadfast strength. "Why, he said, his voice low. "We weren't expecting you until after." I pulled back from my mother, wiping my cheeks with the back of my hand. I took a deep, shuddering breath. "There isn't going to be an after, Dad." I called it off. "I'm not marrying Leo." The silence that followed was heavy, but it wasn't judgmental. It was the silence of careful processing. "Come inside," my father finally said, folding his newspaper. "Let's talk." We sat around the small kitchen table, the same one where I'd done my homework as a girl. My mother poured tea, her hands trembling slightly. I told them everything. The lies about the money, the inflated promises, the crumbling house that was never meant to be a home. I showed them the IOU and the banknote. I didn't tell them about the snow, the loss, the long sickly years of betrayal and death. That burden was mine alone to carry. But I told them enough. "He's not a good man," I finished, my voice firm. "He sees people as stepping stones." I finally saw it. My mother reached across the table and took my hand, her grip fierce. "I always had a bad feeling," she whispered. There was a shiftiness in his eyes when he talked about the future. "But you were so taken with him. I'm just so glad you're home. That's all that matters." My father sipped his tea, then set the cup down with a soft click. "A broken engagement is not a shame," he said, his gaze steady on me. "A lifetime of misery is. You were brave to come back. This is your home. We are not wealthy, but you will never want for a roof or a meal. You start fresh here." Their simple, unwavering support was a balm that sank deep into my soul. The last remnants of the cold I'd carried from Oak Hollow finally thawed. The stone of dread dissolved entirely. The following days were a gentle, healing blur. I helped my mother with the cooking and cleaning, tasks that felt grounding and real. I ventured out to the bustling street markets, letting the cacophony of vendors hawking vegetables, the clang of walks, and the vibrant chatter of life wash over me. This was real. This was solid. This was living. One afternoon, my mother handed me a booklet of ration coupons. "We're low on rice. Be a dear and fetch some from the grain store." Nodding, I took the coupons and stepped out into the sun-dappled alley. I had just closed the gate behind me when a voice, deep and pleasantly surprised, called out, "Maya? Maya Vance, is that really you?" I turned. A tall man stood a few paces away, dressed in the clean, dark blue uniform of a factory worker. He had broad, straight shoulders and a face that was both strong and kind, with gentle eyes currently crinkled in a smile. A jolt of recognition, laced with the melancholy of my old memories, hit me. Daniel Lee. Our old neighbor from when we lived on the other side of Riverside. In my other life after my marriage I'd heard snippets about him. He'd become a respected technician at the machinery plant, known for his skill and quiet reliability. The gossip was that he'd never married, too dedicated to his work and his aging parents. Daniel, I said, returning his smile, an unexpected warmth spreading through me. Hello. He walked over, his gaze curiously scanning my face. I heard you'd moved out to the countryside for a while. I didn't expect to see you back here so soon. He was tactful, not mentioning the obvious, the failed wedding that was surely the talk of the neighborhood. Things didn't work out, I said simply, appreciating his discretion. So I came home. I gestured to the empty sack in my hand. Just on an errand for my mother. Are you heading home from your shift? He nodded. Just finished. Was about to go cook dinner for my parents. He glanced at the sack, then at me. The grain store's on my way. That's a heavy load to carry back. Would you like me to walk with you? The offer was genuine, without presumption. The memory of Leo's performative chivalries, always expecting something in return, flashed and faded. I'd appreciate that, Daniel. Thank you. As we walked, we fell into easy conversation. He talked about new automation at the plant, the challenges and satisfactions of his work. I spoke of being back in Riverside, of helping at home, of enjoying the city's energy again. His words were measured, thoughtful. He spoke of facts and observations, not grand, airy dreams. There was a solidity to him, a calm assurance that felt like an anchor in a world I'd once found terrifyingly adrift. When we reached my gate, he handed me the now heavy sack of rice. Thank you, Daniel. Really? Would you like to come in for some water? He smiled and shook his head. I'd best get home before my mother starts worrying the canteen ran out of food. But it was really good to see you, Maya. If you ever need help with anything, moving something heavy, fixing a leaky tap, my parents still live just around the corner. Don't hesitate to ask. I watched him walk away, his stride long and steady. And a quiet, startling thought bloomed in my mind, fragile as a first bud. A life with a man like that. A kind, steady man. That would be a peaceful life. A safe harbor. I carried the rice inside, the ghost of that thought, and the memory of his steady blue-clad back lingering with me. The peace of home was a living thing, settling into my bones like the warmth from a well-tended stove. But in a city like Riverside, privacy was a rare commodity. News, especially of the romantic variety, traveled through the alleyways and over shared courtyards with the speed of a spring flood. A few days after my return, I was helping my mother shell peas when she broached the subject I knew was coming. She kept her eyes on her nimble fingers, her tone deceptively casual. Maya, your Aunt Celia visited yesterday, she mentioned. Well, she knows a nice young man. A very stable, decent fellow. She thought perhaps now that you're back and settled. My hands stilled. Mom, I just got home. I need time. I need to just be for a while. Be for what? She asked, setting down her bowl and looking at me with loving urgency. A girl's youth isn't endless, darling. This isn't about rushing. It's about being open. This young man, he's a technician at the machinery plant. An only son. His parents are good, honest people. His foreman speaks highly of him. Hardworking, reliable. A prickle of intuition danced up my spine. What's his name, this paragon? Lee, she said. Daniel Lee. The pea I was holding split with a soft pop flying from my fingers. I stared at her. The coincidence was too vast, too perfect. Was it really the same man? Trying to sound nonchalant, I asked, this Daniel Lee. Is he tall? Wears a blue uniform? Lives in the old compound near the silk mill? My mother's face lit up with delight. Yes, that's him. You know him. I ran into him the other day. He helped me carry the rice home. My cheeks felt warm. Well, there you go, she exclaimed, clapping her hands softly. It's fate smiling on you. It's already arranged. Tomorrow afternoon, 3 o'clock. The tea house by the People's Park. Your aunt will make the introductions. Wear your nice green blouse. I didn't refuse. The memory of Daniel's steady gaze and quiet offer of help was a stark, pleasant contrast to the chaotic, emotional wreckage I'd left behind. After the toxic fantasy I'd lived with Leo, the prospect of something real, something stable was not frightening. It was a lifeline. The next afternoon I stood before our small mirror, braiding my hair with more care than I had in years. The green blouse was crisp, simple. I arrived at the quiet, slightly shabby tea house 10 minutes early, my heart fluttering like a trapped sparrow. I hadn't felt this nervous on my first wedding day. That had been a fog of anxious excitement. This was clear, sharp anticipation. I chose a corner table. Before my nerves could fully take hold, the bell above the door chimed. Daniel walked in. He wasn't in his uniform. He wore a simple but clean and well-pressed white shirt. His hair was neatly combed and he carried a small netted bag with 2 golden pairs inside. He saw me and a genuine, slightly shy smile touched his lips. "Why, I hope I didn't keep you waiting." "Not at all," I said, standing too quickly. My cheeks burned again. He was so substantial. In a good way. He sat across from me and slid a pair across the table. "Saw these at a stall. Thought they looked good." "Thank you." Our fingers brushed during the exchange. His hand was warm, work-roughened, and the touch sent a simple, honest spark through me, not the dizzying, manipulative electricity Leo had once conjured, but the solid connection of a completed circuit. A comfortable silence settled, filled only with the faint sounds from the street. He was the first to speak, scratching the back of his head in a gesture that was endearingly awkward. "My mother told me about this meeting. I have to admit, I was hoping it might be you." His directness was disarming. "You were. After I walked you home," he said, meeting my eyes, I thought you seemed like a very sensible, kind person. I was glad you'd come back." His words, so plain and sincere, built a little hearth of warmth in my chest. I gathered my courage. "Daniel, you must have heard about my engagement. That it ended." He nodded, his expression serious but not pitying. "I heard a little. But I believe a marriage should be for life. If it's not right at the start, it's braver to walk away than to march into a lifetime of wrong." That simple sentence felt like an absolution. In my past life, my break with Leo had been painted as a failure, a humiliation. Daniel reframed it as strength. We talked, then truly talked. About his hopes to qualify as a master technician, about my vague thoughts of maybe finding some work, about our families, about the riverside of our childhoods. The afternoon light slanted through the window, turning the dust motes to gold, and I realized with a start that I was perfectly, peacefully happy. He walked me home again. At my gate he paused. "Why, he said, his voice low and earnest. I really enjoyed talking with you today. If you're willing, I'd like to see you again. Properly." I looked into his steady, honest eyes and felt the last vestige of old fear melt away. "I'd like that too, Daniel." The news of us seeing each other spread, and with it came the inevitable whispers. I heard them at the communal water tap, felt them in the sidelong glances at the market. "She jumps from one man to another. Poor Daniel Lee, she must have set her sights on him." One day it came to a head. Daniel had taken me to see a new propaganda film at the Cultural Center. As we left, we bumped into Lillian Zhang, a woman I'd known in school whose smile had always been a little too sharp. "Why, Vance," she trilled, her eyes raking over me, and then Daniel with gleeful malice. My, you don't let the grass grow under your feet, do you? One minute you're the blushing country bride, the next you're on the arm of Riverside's most eligible bachelor. What happened to your undying love for Leo Thorne?" Daniel's face tightened. He stepped slightly in front of me. "That's enough, Lillian. Maya's character is not your concern." But I was done being a ghost, done being whispered about. I stepped out from his protective shadow and faced her directly. My voice was calm, cool. "Lillian, a marriage is a lifetime. Choosing the wrong partner is a mistake. Correcting that mistake is wisdom. Daniel and I are together because we choose to be, with honesty. That's more than can be said for those who invest their time in gossip." She gaped, flushed crimson, and stalked off with a huff. Daniel looked at me, his eyes shining with a mixture of surprise and admiration. "You shouldn't have had to face that." "It's all right," I said, taking his arm. "I'm not that scared girl anymore." But I knew the gossip affected him too, so I decided to meet it head-on. "Daniel," I said a few days later, "I'd like to meet your parents." He looked surprised, then deeply pleased. That very evening he took me to his family's small, immaculate home. His parents were just as I'd imagined. His father quiet and observant, his mother kind-eyed and bustling. Over a simple, delicious meal of braised pork and greens, his mother gently broached the subject. "Maya dear, pay no mind to the nonsense people speak. Once my Daniel sets his heart on something or someone, he's steadfast. We only want his happiness." I put down my chopsticks. "Thank you, Mrs. Lee. The truth is, I left my engagement because I finally saw the man for who he was. I didn't want to live a lie or waste anyone's life. What I feel for Daniel is real. I promise you, if he'll have me, I will build a true, good life with him." Daniel reached under the table and found my hand. His grip was firm, sure. "Mom, Dad," he said, his voice leaving no room for doubt. "Maya is the woman I want to marry. My mind is made up." His father nodded slowly, a deep satisfaction in his eyes. "A clear-eyed woman is a treasure. If you are both sure, then you have our blessing." Sitting there, with Daniel's warm hand in mine and the acceptance of his good family around us, I felt a foundation settle beneath my feet, strong and true. It was nothing like the shaky, performative fantasy Leo had sold me. This was real. This was my new beginning, and I would build it, brick by careful brick. Daniel's proposal was not a grand gesture under moonlight. It came one evening 6 months later, as we walked along the canal after sharing a bowl of noodles. The water reflected the lights of the city and the air was cool. "Maya," he said, stopping to face me. "I'm not a man of fancy words. I can't promise you riches or an easy life. But I can promise you my respect, my hard work, and my faithful heart. Every day. Will you marry me?" Tears sprang to my eyes, but they were tears of pure, uncomplicated joy. "Yes, Daniel. 1,000 times yes." Our wedding was a simple, warm affair in the community hall. A meal for both families, a few close friends. We took one formal black and white photograph. I wore a new blue suit, not a faded red jacket. In the photo, Daniel stands straight beside me, his hand resting lightly on my shoulder. My smile is not the wide, giddy grin of my first wedding day. It is quieter, deeper, rooted in a profound sense of peace. This was my choice. My true beginning. We moved into his family's old house, a small but solid brick dwelling with a tiny courtyard. Life settled into a rhythm that felt like a balm. Daniel left for the plant at dawn, returning each evening to hand me his paycheck, every yuan accounted for. He fixed leaky faucets, built new shelves, and never once complained about helping with washing up. He was a partner in the truest sense. Watching him move through our home, reliable as the sunrise, I knew this was the reality I had been starved for in my other life. But a quiet ambition, born of my hard-won second chance, began to stir within me. It was the early 1990s. Change was humming in the air of Riverside. Private enterprise was no longer a whispered secret. Small businesses were sprouting like mushrooms after rain. I had memories, not dreams, but lived knowledge of what would become popular. The colorful plastic sandals, the oversized sunglasses, the cassette tapes of the new crooners from the South. I had wasted a lifetime bankrolling Leo's doomed schemes. Now I had my own ideas, my own drive. One night over dinner, I broached the subject. "Daniel, I've been thinking. I'd like to try my hand at a small business. A market stall." He looked up from his rice, his expression thoughtful, not dismissive. "A business? Selling what?" "Little things," I said, trying to sound casual. "Things young people like. Hair ribbons, sunglasses, maybe some tapes. I've seen the stalls near the technical school. They're always busy." He chewed slowly, considering. "You've a good head for details. If you think you can do it, then you should try. Just don't take on too much." Then, to my astonishment, he got up, went to the bedroom, and returned with a small, cloth-wrapped bundle. He unfolded it on the table, revealing a stack of bills. "This is 80 yuan I've saved from my skill bonuses. Use it for your first stock. If it's not enough, we'll manage." I stared at the money, then at his earnest face. No conditions. No demand for control. Just support. My throat tightened. "Thank you," I whispered, the words inadequate for the wave of gratitude I felt. The next day, I took the earliest bus to the wholesale district in the provincial capital. I moved through the crowded alleys of the market with a focus I'd never possessed before. I was investing in us, in our future. I bought 30 pairs of trendy round-framed sunglasses, a stack of popular music tapes, and an assortment of hair clips and ribbons in every color. I spent every last yuan of Daniel's savings. That evening, with a heart full of butterflies, I pushed a small cart Daniel had modified for me to a spot near the night market. I laid out my goods on a folding table. For the first hour, nothing. Doubt gnawed at me. Then a girl with braids paused, fingering a lavender ribbon. "How much for this?" "5 mao," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. He bought it. My first sale. The simple exchange felt more triumphant than any of Leo's empty proclamations of future wealth. Then another customer for a pair of sunglasses. Then another for a Teresa Ting tape. A small crowd gathered, drawn by the bright, fashionable wares. When Daniel arrived after his shift, he didn't interrupt. He simply stood at the edge of the crowd, watching me with a soft smile, then quietly began helping to organize the stock and make change. His presence was a silent anchor. At the end of the night, our fingers stained with newsprint from counting bills, we tallied the profit, 12 yuan. Nearly 2 days' wages for a factory worker. We looked at each other and a laugh of sheer, disbelieving joy bubbled out of me. He grinned, a real, broad grin I didn't see often. From then on, Maya's treasures became a fixture. Daniel helped every evening he could. We became a team. He handled the heavy lifting and the difficult customers with a calm patience. I mastered the haggling and learned to predict which items would sell fastest. When city inspectors did their rounds, we became a well-practiced evasion team, him pushing the cart while I scooped up the goods, hiding in alleys with hearts pounding, then emerging laughing like conspirators. It was hard, gritty work. My feet ached, my voice grew hoarse. But it was our work. Our money. We saved diligently, reinvesting some to expand our offerings, scarves in the winter, cheap watches, novelty lighters. The stall grew and so did our earnings. One night, walking home under the amber glow of the streetlights, our linked shadows long on the pavement, Daniel squeezed my hand. "You're a natural at this, Maya. You're bringing in more than my overtime pay." I leaned into his shoulder. "It's not me. This is our project." I took a breath. "When we've saved enough, I'd like to rent a proper shop. A little place of our own. No more rain or inspectors." He didn't hesitate. "Then that's what we'll do." 6 months later, we had saved over 300 yuan. We found a tiny 10-square-meter shopfront in a good location between a bus stop and a housing compound. The rent was 30 yuan a month. We signed the lease with trembling, excited hands. We didn't hire help. After work, Daniel painted the walls a clean, bright white. He built shelves from scrap wood, sanding and varnishing them until they gleamed. I painted a simple sign, arranged the stock and hung movie star posters for decoration. We poured our sweat and hope into every inch. The day Maya and Lee General Goods opened, our parents came to help. We had expanded beyond trinkets to soap, towels, pencils and simple toys. We offered a free postcard with every 5 yuan purchase. The shop was packed from morning till night. We were a whirlwind of activity, but the fatigue was sweet, born of accomplishment. That night, after locking up, we counted the day's take. 47 yuan in profit. We sat on the floor of our little shop, surrounded by our dreams made tangible, stacks of bills between us. We just looked at each other and laughed, giddy with possibility. "We built this," Daniel said, wonder in his voice. "Together," I affirmed, taking his hand. Lying in bed that night, Daniel's steady breathing beside me, I thought of the woman I had been, the one who believed love meant sacrifice unto destruction. That woman was gone. In her place was someone who understood that real love was a foundation, and on it 2 people could build something lasting, brick by hard-won brick. We were no longer just surviving. We were building. And for the first time in either of my lives, I knew with absolute certainty that our future was bright. Our little shop became the steady heartbeat of our new life. The rhythm was demanding but deeply satisfying. Early mornings arranging stock, the cheerful chaos of midday customers, quiet evenings tallying receipts and planning the next order. The income, while not making us rich, provided a security I had never known. We paid off the small loan we'd taken for the first wholesale order and started a proper savings account. My mother would come by to help, her face lit with a pride she'd never been able to show for my life with Leo. One afternoon, as we were unpacking a new shipment of printed cotton dresses, a style I remembered becoming wildly popular, my mother mentioned offhandedly, "I saw your Aunt Celia at the market. She had news from Oak Hollow." My hands paused on the soft fabric. I kept my expression neutral. "Oh, She said that Leo Thorne. Well, he hasn't fared well. She spoke carefully, watching me. After you left, he found another city girl, tried the same promises. But her family had little to give. He got involved in some scheme buying apples from the north, a partnership. He was cheated, lost everything. Deep in debt now. His parents are selling off bits of their land just to eat. A real mess. I smoothed the dress on its hanger, feeling the cool cotton under my fingers. In my past life, this news would have been a twisted vindication, or worse, a siren call to my foolish, salvaging heart, a reason to run back and try to fix things. Now I felt nothing but a distant, cold ripple, like a stone dropped in a pond far, far away. He chose his path, I said softly, hanging the dress on the rack. His choices have their own consequences. They're not mine to bear. Daniel, who was stacking boxes nearby, glanced over and gave my shoulder a gentle, reassuring squeeze. He said nothing, but his touch was a silent affirmation. You're here. You're safe. This is your life now. That night, as we walked home under a sky scattered with early stars, Daniel laced his fingers through mine. Don't let old ghosts trouble you, he said, his voice quiet in the evening hush. Our life is here. It's real and it's good. I leaned into him, drawing strength from his solid presence. They don't trouble me, I said, and realized it was the absolute truth. I'm just grateful. Every single day I'm grateful I walked away. Our business continued to thrive. The wholesale side in particular grew beyond our expectations. Vendors from nearby towns began seeking us out, buying dozens of items at a time. The retail shop was successful, but the sheer volume of bulk orders hinted at a larger opportunity. One evening after closing the ledger, I turned to Daniel. The wholesale requests are getting too big to handle from the shop floor. What if we focused on that? Rented a small warehouse space? The profit per item is less, but the volume. We could build something much more substantial. Daniel poured me a cup of tea, his brow furrowed in thought. It's a bigger risk. We'd need reliable, larger suppliers. Better contracts. I know, I said, excitement threading my voice. I think we should go back to the provincial capital. Not to the market stalls, but to the actual distribution centers, the factory outlets. We need to cut out the middlemen. A week later, armed with our savings and a newfound confidence, we boarded the train. This trip was a world away from my desperate, lonely bus ride to buy my first stock. We were partners with a clear plan. We navigated the sprawling wholesale districts not as awestruck newcomers, but as serious buyers. We secured meetings, negotiated terms, and left with signed contracts from 3 suppliers, guaranteeing us monthly deliveries at prices that made my former market stall heart sing. Transitioning to a wholesale model was a new kind of hard work. We rented a small, dusty warehouse on the outskirts of Riverside. Our days were filled with logistics. Receiving shipments, sorting inventory, fulfilling orders for a growing network of small-town vendors. The phone in our now office rang constantly. Daniel reduced his hours at the plant to part-time, his technical mind proving invaluable for organizing systems and managing deliveries. We were a machine perfectly synced. He handled the heavy physical logistics and the numbers. I managed the client relationships, tracked trends, and placed orders. It was during this whirlwind of building that I discovered I was pregnant. The moment the doctor confirmed it, a tremor of pure, unadulterated joy, tinged with the faintest shadow of old grief, shot through me. I clutched the slip of paper and went straight to the warehouse. Daniel was heaving a box of enamelware onto a shelf. "Daniel," I said, my voice trembling. He turned, saw my face, and froze. The box thumped to the concrete floor. In 2 strides he was before me, his hands coming up to cradle my face. "Maya? What is it? Are you ill?" I shook my head, tears spilling over. I pressed the paper into his hand. He looked down, his eyes scanning the characters. His breath hitched. For a long moment he was utterly still. Then a shudder ran through him and he pulled me into a crushing embrace, burying his face in my hair. "A baby?" he whispered, his voice thick. "We're going to have a baby." I nodded against his chest, sobbing and laughing at once. In my other life, pregnancy had been a time of fear, of exhaustion, of desperate hope always dashed. This was what it was supposed to be. A celebration. A promise. A life growing within a life already filled with love and security. Daniel became impossibly more attentive. He banned me from lifting anything heavier than a ledger. He brought home peaches and plums because he'd heard they were good for expectant mothers. At night, he'd rest his large, calloused hand on my still flat belly and talk softly about the world our child would see. When I was 7 months along, we used a chunk of our savings as a down payment on a new home. It was a proper 2-bedroom brick house with a real kitchen and a small walled courtyard where a child could play. It wasn't a mansion, it was a home. Our home. On moving day, Daniel held me in the middle of the sunlit main room. "This is ours, Maya. All of it. We built this." At the end of the year our son was born. We named him Samuel, a name that meant heard by God. To me it meant a prayer answered, a life listened to and granted a second chance. He was pink and perfect with a shock of dark hair and Daniel's solemn eyes. As I held his tiny warm weight against my chest, listening to his soft, snuffling breaths, the last hidden shards of my old broken heart finally knit together completely. Our business flourished. By the time Sam was 3, we had secured the exclusive distribution rights for 2 regional clothing brands. The warehouse was expanded and we hired 3 local men to help with loading and deliveries. Daniel left the plant for good. We were business owners, partners in every sense. One crisp autumn morning, I went to the main wholesale market in Riverside to check on a new line of jackets. The passageways were crammed with carts and bustling buyers. As I passed a stack of empty crates, I noticed a man hunched over a rubbish bin, pulling out crushed cardboard and plastic bottles. His jacket was a grimy patchwork of stains, his hair matted. He was just another of the city's many scavengers, a sight so common it barely registered. But as I drew level he straightened up to stuff his findings into a sack. Our eyes met. Time seemed to stutter. The noise of the market faded. It was Leo. The change was horrific. The confident, slyly handsome young man was gone. In his place was a gaunt specter. Deep grooves were carved from his nose to the corners of his mouth. His eyes, once full of cunning charm, were dull and hollow, sunk deep in sockets shadowed by hunger and defeat. He looked 20 years older. Recognition flared in his gaze, followed immediately by a cringing shame. He shrank back, trying to melt into the shadow of the crates. I stopped walking. A strange calm settled over me. There was no anger, no schadenfreude. Just a profound, almost anthropological observation of ruin. "Leo Thorne," I said, my voice quiet but clear. He flinched. For a long moment he didn't speak, his eyes darting from my face to my tailored wool jacket, to the leather portfolio in my hand. "Maya," he finally croaked. The voice was a ruin too, stripped of all its persuasive oil. "What are you doing here?" I asked, not unkindly but without warmth. He looked down at the dirty bottles in his hands, then tried to hide them behind his back. A futile, pathetic gesture. I get by." His gaze flickered past me and his expression tightened. I turned. Daniel was walking toward us, having just finished with a supplier. He came to my side, his posture instinctively protective. "Everything all right, Maya?" he asked, his eyes on Leo, curious but polite. "Yes," I said. "Just an old acquaintance." Leo's eyes widened as he took in Daniel, his clean, sturdy work clothes, his calm, assured bearing, the wedding band on his finger. The pieces connected in his mind. His face contorted through a rapid journey of emotions. Shock, a dawning understanding, and finally, a bitter, all-consuming envy that twisted his features. You too," he stammered. "We're married," Daniel said evenly, stating a simple fact. Leo's jaw worked. He looked from Daniel's face back to mine and something in him seemed to snap. The shame was burned away by a sudden, desperate rage. His voice rose, cracking. "Maya, I told you I was going to be a success. I was going to be rich. Why did it turn out like this for me?" His shout drew glances from nearby vendors. Daniel's hand found the small of my back, a steadying pressure. Leo took a stumbling step forward, his eyes wild, pleading and accusatory at once. "If you'd stayed, if you'd believed in me, it could have been different." I looked at this broken, furious man, still blaming the world for his own choices. And I felt nothing but a vast oceanic pity. The last ghost of my past had risen, only to show me it was just a hollow shell. The answer he craved was not one of blame but of truth. And for the first time, for my own closure as much as his, I decided to give it to him. The market alley seemed to shrink, the cacophony of commerce fading to a dull roar behind the pounding in my ears. Leo stood before me, trembling not from cold but from a fever of frustration and despair. The crowd of onlookers thickened, drawn by the raw emotion in his cry. Daniel's presence beside me was a rock, silent and solid. He didn't speak, only watched Leo with a calm, assessing gaze that seemed to unnerve the other man further. Leo's chest heaved. "Well?" he demanded, the word a ragged challenge. "You were supposed to be my wife. You owed me your support." Those words, once so potent in their manipulation, now hung in the air, empty and absurd. I felt no anger rise to meet them. Instead, a profound clarity settled over me. This was the final knot to untie. "I owe you nothing, Leo," I said, my voice low but carrying in the sudden quiet of our little circle. "But since you've asked why so loudly, I'll tell you. The reason you failed wasn't because I left. It was because of you. Only you." He recoiled as if struck. "Me? I had vision. I had ambition. You had greed," I corrected him, my tone matter-of-fact. "You had laziness dressed up as big thinking. You borrowed money for timber and bought a rifle. You took funds for a house and watched them vanish. You didn't want to build, you wanted to appear built. You thought hard work was beneath you and small, honest profits were an insult to your potential." I took a small step forward, holding his bewildered, angry gaze. "The 1990s have been full of opportunity, Leo. Real opportunity. Daniel and I started with a street stall. We stood in the rain and the wind. We counted every fun. We built our business one cassette tape, one pair of socks, one trusting customer at a time. We took risks, yes, but they were calculated. We worked. We saved. We persevered." I gestured around us at the bustling, mercantile energy of the market. "This is where fortunes are made now. Not in grand, shady schemes but in grit and consistency. You got cheated in your Apple deal because you were looking for a shortcut, a big score. You were greedy, and the world has a way of punishing greed that isn't backed by sense." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. "She's right, you know," a woman selling bolts of cloth muttered. "No substitute for hard graft." A man stacking crates nodded. "Seen his type before. All talk, no foundation." Leo's face was a mask of agony. The truth, plainly spoken, was a weapon he had no defense against. His defiance crumpled. His shoulders slumped and his eyes glistened. "But everyone said I was clever," he whispered, more to himself than to me. "They said I was meant for more than this." "Being clever isn't the same as being wise," I said, and my voice softened, not with compassion for him but with finality. "Wisdom is knowing that a foundation of honesty and hard work will never betray you. You never lacked opportunity, Leo. You lacked the character to seize it properly." A harsh, ragged sob broke from him. He covered his face with grimy hands, his body shaking. The proud, preening peacock of Oak Hollow was gone, reduced to a weeping heap of regret on the dirty concrete. Daniel touched my elbow. "Maya, we should go. The warehouse manager is waiting." I nodded. I took one last look at the broken man on the ground, not with triumph, but with the detachment of a chapter finally, irrevocably closed. His misery was his own monument, built by his own hands. We turned and walked away, the crowd parting silently for us. As we stepped out of the market's shadow into the full light of the autumn sun, Daniel squeezed my hand. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. I looked up at him, at the lines of kindness and reliability around his eyes, and felt a wave of pure, unshadowed love. "I am," I said, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. "I let that go a long time ago. All that matters is you, Sam, and the life we've built." When we arrived home, the sound of laughter greeted us. Sam came tearing down the hallway on his sturdy little legs, his face alight. "Mama, Papa, you're back." I scooped him up, breathing in the sweet, clean scent of his hair. He chattered about the picture he'd drawn at my mother's house. Daniel ruffled his hair and went to wash up, the familiar, comforting sounds of our evening routine beginning. Later, as I sat on the sofa with Sam curled asleep in my lap, Daniel brought me a cup of tea. The setting sun streamed through our courtyard window, painting the walls in gold. I looked around at our home, the modest but comfortable furniture, the shelf of ledgers and children's books, the toys scattered lovingly on the rug. My heart swelled with a gratitude so deep it was almost a physical ache. I was grateful for the brutal lessons of a lost life. Grateful for the courage to walk away from a glittering trap. Grateful most of all for the quiet, strong man who had offered me not dizzying dreams, but a steady hand and a shared purpose. Daniel sat beside me, his arms slipping around my shoulders. He followed my gaze around our peaceful living room, then to our sleeping son. He didn't need to say anything. The contentment on his face mirrored my own. Dreams of easy wealth are illusions fragile as cobwebs. And a life built on potential is a house on sand. True wealth, I had learned, isn't counted in yuan alone. It's in the quiet moments of safety. It's in the shared fatigue after an honest day's work. It's in the trust in a partner's eyes and the weight of a sleeping child in your arms. In my first life, I had burned myself to ash trying to keep someone else's false flame alive. In this life, I had learned to tend my own fire, a steady, warm hearth, and had found a partner who brought his own wood to the burn. I had not just escaped a tragedy. I had authored a triumph. A simple, profound human triumph. And as Daniel's fingers gently stroked my hair and Sam sighed in his sleep, I knew with absolute certainty, I had finally, completely become the woman I was meant to be.